In October 2011, a cheerleader in upstate New York woke up from a nap with a stutter. Within hours, her entire body began twitching uncontrollably. She couldn't stop. Her name was kept private for medical reasons, but what happened to her would become one of the most disturbing psychological outbreaks in modern history. She was a popular student, athletic, normal life, and then everything changed in a single afternoon. The twitching started in her hands, then her arms, then her whole body would jerk without warning. She'd be walking down the hallway and suddenly her head would snap to the side, hard, over and over. She had no control, but the worst part. The verbal tics, words and sounds she didn't want to make would just burst out of her, in class, at dinner, in the middle of the night. Imagine not being able to control what comes out of your own mouth. Her parents rushed her to doctors, neurologist after neurologist. They thought maybe it was Tourette's syndrome or a seizure disorder, or maybe she'd hit her head during cheerleading practice and didn't remember. The tests came back, normal brain activity, no signs of Tourette's, no head trauma, no explanation. The doctors were stumped. And then, 3 days later, her friends started showing the exact same symptoms. Another cheerleader, same school, same friend group. She woke up and her body just started moving on its own. The same jerking, the same tics, the same verbal outbursts, like someone had copy and pasted the illness from one girl to another. Within a week, a third girl got sick, then a fourth, then a fifth, all from the same high school. In Leroy, New York, all friends, all watching each other suffer, and all developing identical symptoms within days of each other. The school went into panic mode. Parents demanded answers. Was it a virus? Was it in the water? Was it something in the school building itself? The health department got involved. The CDC was contacted. This wasn't normal. By January 2012, 14 students at Leroy Junior Senior High School were affected. 13 girls and 1 boy. Their bodies moved on their own. They stuttered. They shouted things they didn't mean to say. Some couldn't walk without falling. Some had seizure-like episodes that lasted for hours. One girl described it like being trapped inside her own body. She could see what was happening. She could feel her body moving, but she couldn't stop it. It was like being a passenger in a car that someone else was driving. The symptoms got worse when the girls were together. If one girl's tics got bad, the others would start twitching. More. It was like they were feeding off each other's suffering, like the illness was contagious, but not in any way science could explain. Doctors ran every test imaginable. Blood work came back normal. Brain scans showed nothing. MRIs were clear. Spinal taps found no infection. EEGs showed no seizure activity. Every test pointed to one conclusion: there was nothing physically wrong with these kids, but the symptoms were real. These weren't attention-seeking. Teenagers. They were missing school, missing their lives. One girl couldn't compete in cheerleading anymore. Another couldn't play in her soccer games. They wanted it to stop. They begged for it to stop. Then the environmental testing began. Leroy sits 3 miles from an old industrial site where 30,000 gallons of toxic chemicals leaked into the ground in 1971. Trichloroethylene, a known neurotoxin. Could that be it? Environmental activists, including Aaron Brockovich, came to Leroy. They tested the soil around the school. They tested the groundwater. They tested the air inside the building. They were sure they'd find something, some toxin, some poison that explained everything. But the tests came back clean. The contamination from 1971 hadn't reached the school. The water was safe. The air was safe. There was no environmental cause, no toxin, no poison, nothing that could explain why 14 kids suddenly couldn't control their own bodies. That's when the New York State Department of Health made their diagnosis: mass psychogenic illness, conversion disorder, what used to be called mass hysteria, the mind creating real physical symptoms with no medical cause. The parents were furious. Their kids weren't crazy. This wasn't in their heads. The symptoms were real. You could see them. You could measure them. How could this be psychological? But here's the thing about conversion disorder. It is real. The symptoms are physically real. Your brain is so stressed, so overwhelmed, that it starts creating physical symptoms. Your mind literally makes your body sick, and it's not something you're doing on purpose. You can't just stop. And here's what makes the Leroy case different from any mass hysteria outbreak in history. This was the first one in the age of social media. The affected girls started posting videos of their symptoms on Facebook, on YouTube, showing the world what was happening to them. The videos went viral, hundreds of thousands of views, millions. Eventually, local news picked it up, then national news. The girls appeared on the Today Show, Good Morning America, CNN, Dr. Drew. Everyone wanted to know what was happening in Leroy. And as the media coverage exploded, something terrifying happened. More people got sick, not just students. Adults in the town started showing symptoms. A school nurse, a teacher, a 36-year-old mother who had seen the news coverage. The symptoms were spreading faster than any virus ever could, not through touch, not through air, but through screens, through videos, through watching other people suffer. The outbreak was going viral in every sense of the word. Neurologists studying the outbreak realized something that had never been documented before. The media coverage itself was making it worse. Every time someone watched a video of a girl twitching, their brain was learning that behavior, mirroring it, and in some people, that mirroring became involuntary. There's a concept in neuroscience called mirror neurons. When you watch someone do something, the same neurons fire in your brain as if you were doing it yourself. That's why you flinch when you see someone get hurt, why you smile when someone smiles at you. But in Leroy, those mirror neurons weren't just making people empathize. They were making people sick. The brain's normal process of social learning had gone haywire, and social media was the perfect vector, the perfect way to spread psychological contagion across vast distances. One of the treating neurologists said something chilling. In an interview, he said every view, every share, every comment on those videos reinforced the symptoms, made them stronger, made them more likely to spread. The attention fed the illness fed the attention, a perfect feedback loop. Parents divided into camps. Some accepted the diagnosis, started therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, gradual exposure, teaching the brain to unlearn the symptoms, and slowly, over months, those kids got better. But other parents refused to believe it. They were convinced it was a cover-up, that the government was hiding environmental contamination, that the doctors were part of some conspiracy. They kept their kids away from therapy, and those kids stayed sick longer. The legal battles started. Parents sued the school district, sued the companies responsible for the 1971 chemical spill, sued anyone they could think of. They wanted someone to blame, someone to hold accountable, because accepting that it was psychological felt like accepting that it wasn't real. But conversion disorder doesn't mean fake. It doesn't mean the person is lying or seeking attention. The symptoms are as real as any physical illness. They're just caused by the brain instead of by a virus or toxin, and they're just as debilitating. One of the affected girls said something in an interview that stuck with everyone who heard it. She said, "A lot of people say we're faking it. I'd like to see anyone do what we do 24 hours a day and try to fake that. If I could stop, I would. If I had control, I would stop. But I don't." The breakthrough came when doctors started separating the girls, keeping them away from each other, turning off the news coverage. No more videos, no more social media, no more watching each other's symptoms. And slowly, the symptoms started to fade. It took months. Some took a year or more, but most of the 14 original students recovered completely. The twitching stopped. The verbal tics disappeared. They went back to school, back to sports, back to normal life, not because of medication, but because the psychological triggers were removed. But a few never fully recovered. The symptoms became chronic. Years later, some still have occasional tics, still struggle with sudden movements they can't control. The longer the symptoms persisted, the harder they were to unlearn. And the adult cases? Some of them had it worse than the kids, took longer to recover, harder to treat, because adults have more firmly established neural pathways. Their brains had more deeply learned the symptoms. The scariest part about the Leroy outbreak isn't that it happened, it's that it could happen again. Actually, it is happening again, right now, all over the world. Mass psychogenic illness outbreaks have been documented for centuries. Dancing plagues in medieval Europe, laughing epidemics in Africa, twitching outbreaks in factories. But they were always limited by geography, by physical proximity. You had to see the person suffering in front of you. Not anymore. Now you can see thousands of people suffering with a single scroll. TikTok challenges that send kids to the hospital. YouTube videos that trigger seizures. Instagram posts that spread anxiety and panic, the screen has become the most efficient vector for psychological contagion in human history. And we're building more screens, more cameras, more ways to share every moment of suffering, every symptom, every crisis. We're creating the perfect ecosystem for psychological outbreaks to spread faster and farther than ever before. Some researchers are calling it social media contagion syndrome, the spread of behaviors, symptoms, and psychological conditions through digital observation and social learning. And it's not just physical symptoms, it's anxiety, depression, self-harm behaviors, eating disorders, all spreading through screens. Before you go, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for more disturbing true stories like this one. Seriously, this stuff is documented. It's real, and it's still happening. And if you're into dark fiction that explores the terrifying side of the human mind, check out my books at the link in the description. I mess be fates, and I write about the psychological horror that lives in the space between reality and perception. Trust me, if this story disturbed you, you'll love what I've written. The outbreak in Leroy officially ended by late 2012. Most students recovered. Life went back to normal. The news crews packed up and left. The town wanted to move on and forget the whole thing ever happened. But the questions remain. How many symptoms are real in the traditional sense, and how many are transmitted through observation? How many outbreaks are spreading right now through the screen you're looking at? How many behaviors are we learning without realizing it? And here's the most disturbing question of all. If your brain can make you sick just from watching other people be sick, what else can it do? What other symptoms can spread through screens? What other conditions are contagious through observation alone? Every time you watch someone in distress on your phone, your mirror neurons are firing, your brain is learning. Most of the time, nothing happens. You scroll past, you forget, but sometimes in the right person, under the right stress, with the right vulnerability, something takes hold. Mass psychogenic illness doesn't need to be contagious in the traditional sense. It doesn't need viruses or bacteria. It doesn't need physical contact. It just needs you to watch. It needs you to see. It needs you to mirror. And in the age of infinite content, infinite screens, infinite suffering on display, we're all watching all the time. The Leroy outbreak taught us that the mind is more powerful than we ever imagined, that the boundary between physical and psychological illness is thinner than we thought, that contagion doesn't always need a germ. Sometimes all it needs is a screen and someone watching on the other side. So the next time you're scrolling through your feed and you see someone suffering, someone sick, someone unable to control their own body, remember Leroy, remember that your brain is watching, learning, mirroring, and ask yourself, are you really just an observer? Or are you already infected?